Okay, Assalamu alaikum. We will now officially get started. Thank you all so much for being here and for joining us. My name is Fatuma Mohamed, and I serve as the Youth Advocacy Director for the Council of American Islamic Relations. We are so grateful to have you with us as we continue to engage our community on this critical conversation around what is happening to Muslim students in public schools. And I, along with my colleague Aneeqa Abid and Barbara Dougan, are the co-writers for this report. And I'd love to introduce Aneeqa to introduce herself.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. As Fatuma mentioned, my name is Aneeqa, and I'm a co-author along with Fatuma for this 2025 bullying report. And we will be facilitating this webinar together today, inshallah.
Thank you, Aneeqa. So to give you a quick glance of what is going to happen tonight, we will have a welcome address from our Executive Director, Tahir Wadud, who will introduce CAIR Massachusetts in the bullying report. And we have a couple of special guests with us, Senator Jamie Eldridge, who will be sharing a few words about a piece of legislation that is relevant to the findings of this report. And Lena, who is a senior in high school and a student speaker, who will be sharing her experience with Islamophobia and bullying. And then we'll go through some of the key findings from the report, and then move to the recommendations for students, for parents, for masjids and community leaders. And then we'll have Barb, who will talk us through the anti-bullying laws and advocacy that is present in the report, and then have some time for Q&A in the section. I highly recommend for you all, as we go throughout the presentation, to write your questions in the Q&A portal that you have in the Zoom throughout the report.
And before we get started, we would just like the entire CAIR Massachusetts staff who's present today to just quickly introduce themselves.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Miriam Ada. I'm a civil rights attorney working with CAIR Massachusetts. Barbara, you're on mute. No worries.
One in every group. I'm sorry. I'm Barb Dougan. I'm the low-tech legal director at CAIR Massachusetts.
Good evening. I'm Tahira Wadud. I'm the executive director of CAIR Massachusetts.
Thank you, Tahira. Now, Tahira, please go ahead and share a little bit about CAIR and introduce the bullying report, please.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to do so. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for being here. As I mentioned, my name is Tahira Wadud. I have the honor of serving as the executive director and chief legal officer for the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR Massachusetts. I am so proud of our team and of our work, and I'm glad you'll be here to hear more about it tonight. At CAIR Massachusetts, we are dedicated to addressing challenges like Islamophobia, bullying, and discrimination. We work to create a more just and inclusive society. Tonight, we are sharing the results of a project over a year and a half in the making, one that highlights the impact of Islamophobia on Muslim students in our public and charter schools throughout the Commonwealth. This data was released just last week, and you are among the first to receive an in-depth, behind-the-scenes analysis of the research and findings and our recommendations that accompany them. Our students have bravely shared their experiences, and we must support them in feeling empowered, confident, and safe in their schools. We hope this report inspires action so that all children, regardless of faith, can thrive in their education. Please support our work. Join our mailing list. Join our social medias. We are only able to do this work with the financial and moral support of you, our community members. This evening, we are honored to have with us Senator Jamie Eldridge. Senator Eldridge serves as state senator for the Middlesex and Worcester district and is the Senate sponsor of the Muslim American Commission bill, now in its second session. This legislation is deeply relevant to our research and report findings. We are so grateful for his leadership. Please join me in welcoming Senator Jamie Eldridge.
Great. Thank you so much, Tahira. Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for allowing me to say a few words with the release of the CAIR-MA bullying report. This is such a critical report. I remember being with Tahira and members of the Muslim community at the Islamic Society of Boston and Wayland during last year's Ramadan after an iftar, talking about the experiences that many Muslim youth and Muslim Americans in general have had due to Islamophobia. And I was proud to organize, working with CAIR-MA, a forum on Islamophobia last year that really was one of the first events in the region. The district I represent is a Metro West district that has a growing Muslim population to gather and to hear from individuals, especially young people, talk about how they've been bullied and discriminated against. And I just want to say that, I think often for many Muslim Americans, it's not just being discriminated against based on religion, but often many Muslim Americans are immigrants and also people of color. And so the discrimination that many Muslim Americans feel is particularly devastating, and it is unacceptable, and I'm committed to doing whatever I can to make sure it doesn't happen, especially in our public schools. Tahira had mentioned that I have filed a piece of legislation, and it's important to lift up this idea of creating a American Muslim Commission for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Is that we have many commissions right now looking at the status of women, Asian Americans, African Americans, Latino Americans, the LGBTQ population, and they're also created last year a commission on anti-Semitism. So it is absolutely critical and critical to be fair and equitable to create this commission. What the legislation is called an act promoting the civil rights and inclusion of American Muslims in the Commonwealth. And the reality is that despite the successes of many Muslim Americans, including in Massachusetts, there really is a sense of exclusion. And I will just say, working at the State House, which is already a place where there's not a lot of people of color working at the State House, I'm very proud to have on my staff a communications director, Efna Nahela, who does incredible work for me on multiple issues, including this legislation. But the reality is, I believe she's one of just 2 or 3 Muslim Americans in the entire State House. So that really highlights the problems we have. And so what the commission would do, it would be a standing commission, is it would identify and recommend qualified American Muslims for appointed positions at all levels of government, assess how programs and practices in all state agencies impact American Muslims, advise executive and legislative bodies on how various policies impact American Muslims, and promote activities that will enable the state of Massachusetts to realize the full benefit of the skills, talents, and cultural heritage of American Muslims. So this is a really critical piece of legislation. There was some beginning organizing around it last session. This is the second legislative session the bill's been filed. And so I would just say, whether it's reaching out to your own Muslim community, whether it's within your mosque, whether it's the different organizations that often advocate for Arab, Middle Eastern, or Muslim Americans, is we really need to make sure that legislators hear more from the Muslim community. I know it's often quite difficult, in part largely because of the discrimination and the sense of other that many Muslim Americans feel, but it's really critical to do that outreach and really highlight again the growing Muslim American population, including in the district that I represent. So thanks so much for allowing me to say a few words. I'm really looking forward to the report, and I'll be doing everything to lift up that report and communicate it to my constituents and do what I can to combat Islamophobia. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Senator Eldridge. We really appreciate you joining us here today and speaking and sharing your work on this key piece of legislation. We really hope to continue to work with you and the Muslim community to make this vision a reality, make this bill a law. Thank you. And next, I'd like to introduce Lena Muntasser, who is a high school senior student at Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School, and she will be sharing her experiences with Islamophobia and giving a voice to the findings that we will subsequently share.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Lena Al-Muntasir. I am a senior at Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School, where I co-founded and currently serve as a co-president of the Muslim Students Association there. I want to take you guys through my experience as a visibly Muslim student in an environment that claims to champion diversity, equity, and inclusion, but too often falls apart. Before anything else, I want to be clear. I love my hijab. It is an important part of my identity, but it is not my only identity. I am a student, I am a leader, I am an advocate and a friend and so much more. Yet time and time again, I have been reduced to just the scarf on my head. I can't begin to count the number of times teachers have confused me with other hijabi students. There's one student in particular, Maryam. She and I look nothing alike. We have different heights, we wear different hijab styles, and we're not even the same race. She's South Asian and has a much darker skin complexion than me. And yet, teachers have talked to me for full conversations, fully convinced that I was her. This hasn't just happened to me. This has happened to Maryam, thinking that I was her. This has happened to my younger sister, who also wears hijab, on multiple accounts. And it makes me wonder just how long has DEI been a topic in our schools and faculty training and workshops? You know, our school, particularly at least the LS, they constantly tell us and push us, yeah, we accept you, we understand you, and we see you. But no, they only see what they want to see. And this theme of ignorance and erasure doesn't stop at mistaken identities, unfortunately. It seeps into the curriculum, into classroom discussions, and into the very way my school approaches Islam. I've actually had a teacher come up to me and just say she thinks that there's better ways to be modest, implying my hijab. Another example is the way Islam is presented in literature classes. There's a teacher at my school who teaches a book, A Thousand Splendid Suns, and for those who are unaware, it is a novel set in Afghanistan. The problem, this teacher, like many other faculty members at my school, has very limited knowledge of Islam. They fail to separate cultural practices from religious beliefs, and I know for a fact that many students walk away from this class with serious misconceptions about my faith. When Maryam took this class freshman year, she had to constantly correct misinformation and answer students' questions because the teacher simply wasn't equipped to do so. And now, with Maryam gone, the teacher has decided to change her approach. She now prints articles from Islamic sources explaining the hijab and our views on it. Okay, great. But alongside them, she's decided to distribute articles from Western media and sources on their views of hijab. And she proceeds to have students debate on this topic. Let me say that again. She has students debate on whether the hijab is oppressive or not. This honestly shocked me. Not only did this teacher refuse to let Maryam and me come in and answer questions directly, but she also turned in this simple religious practice into a topic of controversy. We would never sit in a classroom and debate whether a Jewish man is allowed to wear a yarmulke or whether a nun has a right to wear a habit. You know, they don't get these type of questions, but They get recognized as religious choices, not political statements. And yet when it comes to Muslim women, our choices are constantly up for debate. And then there are moments that just leave me speechless. Where moments where I have to ask myself, am I really the first hijabi to ever walk these halls? One day, a teacher came up to me and started telling me this ridiculous story. He said that his friend and his friend's girlfriend traveled to Morocco, where a man approached them and asked to buy his girlfriend in exchange for camels. Like, can we let seep in for a minute? Like, buy his girlfriend in exchange for camels. This is complete and utterly absurd. It is completely fabricated based on outdated and offensive stereotypes. Yet, not only did this teacher believe it, he thought it was completely appropriate to share it with his student. And it's honestly exhausting having to be the one who constantly corrects misinformation, who explains why something is offensive, who is constantly expected to defend the religion of over 1 billion people. And it doesn't stop with me. My younger sister, who also wears the hijab, has faced even more hostility, I think directly from students. She has had students call her terrorists in the hallways. She's had classmates ask her where she's hiding her bomb on multiple accounts. And unfortunately, the school has only been successful in putting these incidents under the rug, despite numerous reports from her and my family. But I think the worst moment for her was when a teacher actually came up to her and asked if she was being forced to wear the hijab. And it's like, really? Aren't we past this? Have we learned nothing as a society? These are very old and tired, harmful stereotypes that I would think have been dismantled many, many years ago. Yet somehow they are still very much alive in my school. And it just really makes me sit and ask myself, am I like the first Muslim to walk the hallways of my high school? I don't want to just end this speech in frustration. I want to end it with a call of action because while these experiences have been exhausting, they have also motivated me. I co-founded my school's MSA because I want to build a space where Muslim students didn't have to constantly defend themselves, where they could just be. I have spoken on many panels just like this. I've led interfaith discussions, advocated for a school that is truly inclusive, but this work just doesn't work by itself. To my fellow students, I urge you guys to call out ignorance when you see it. When a classmate repeats a stereotype, challenge it. When a teacher gets something wrong, correct them. To the educators in this room, don't just talk about diversity, practice it. Listen to your Muslim students, educate yourselves on our faith, and please stop reducing us to our hijabs. Real inclusion isn't about isn't real inclusion isn't about token diversity statements. It's about seeing us not as symbols, not as debates, but as full complex human beings. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Lena. You are truly inspiring. Thank you for your courage and for speaking up about your experiences and refusing to be silent, refusing to silently accept these horrible and burdensome experiences. Unfortunately, the experiences that Lena has shared are not unique, and trying to understand the prevalence of these experiences is actually what motivated our bullying report. So CAIR Massachusetts has been contacted for legal support for many disturbing bullying cases that our Muslim community has experienced. Some of these cases from just this year include a poisoning incident in which a high school student was poisoned by a classmate who added rubbing alcohol to his water bottle. A middle school student suffered a severe concussion after being punched by an older student who repeatedly bullied him and called him slurs like a nasty Middle Easterner. And we received many other concussion cases as well. And as it is also important to note that after October 2023, soon after the outbreak of the war in Gaza, a lot of students faced Islamophobia, a spike in Islamophobia, and a student was called a Nazi by his classmates, and they falsely accused him of carrying a bomb. So trying to understand the prevalence of these incidents is what motivated the bullying report. And our first bullying report was conducted in 2021, and we followed up with this 2025 bullying report to continue to monitor the prevalence of these incidents. So I will now hand it to Fatuma to before I do that, we will be presenting our findings. You can also access the report here using your using the QR code. You can open up your camera on your phone and scan the QR code, and you can go through the PDF while we share the findings and recommendations. So now I will hand it over to Fatuma to go over the key findings.
Great. Thank you so much, Aneeqa. So an important part of this report is the stories of the Muslim students, both those that came into our office, but also the 325 students across Massachusetts who participated in this report. We wanted to make sure that we were getting a wide representative of students. So when you're looking at this report and you're looking at these statistics and these numbers that I'm going to go through, I want you all to think about the fact that this is representing 11 counties out of the 14 counties across Massachusetts. And it is also representing students from 6th grade all the way to 12th grade. And you can see the percentage breakdown there. But it also is students that are coming from ethnic diverse backgrounds as well. And also it is looking at a breakdown of 47% of the participants who participated were Muslim boys and 53% are Muslim women. So in this report, one of the main things that we were looking at is to understand the prevalence of bullying. And I want you all to just like reflect on it. I know we don't have the chat portion in the webinar, but just to think about it, like what percentage of public school students nationally do you think experience bullying between the ages of 12 to 18? Would you say it's 5%, 10%, 18%, 19%, 30%, maybe? Well, the research shows that 19% of public school students between the ages of 12 to 18 experience bullying. And with that in mind, with that 19% in mind, what percentage of Muslim students in public schools in Massachusetts do you think experience bullying? Do you think it's higher than 19%, lower than 19%, drastically more than 19%? Our data shows that 38% of students note experiencing bullying. And I want you all to think about like this data to what the next question that I'm going to ask you, which is what percentage of Muslim students in public school experience bullying due to the fact that they're Muslim? And do you think that those two numbers, Muslim students who say they experience bullying and Muslim students who say they experience bullying because of the fact that they're Muslim, are similar, different? Our data shows that 48% of students said that they experience bullying because of their Muslim identity. And I would love for you all to reflect on it and even like send me an email. I'm going to have my email later on. Why do you think there is a 10% difference in that data? So now kind of going into the key findings from the report, as I just noted in the last slide, between the 2023 to 2024 academic year, nearly half of the students reported experiencing bullying because of their Muslim identity. 1, 2, among them, 22% indicated that they face bullying related to their religious identity on a regular basis. That looks like monthly, weekly, and for some students, it's a daily occurrence. And 37% of students have witnessed another Muslim student being bullied at school due to their religious identity. So even if they themselves might not be the ones who are experiencing bullying, they are watching other Muslim students experiencing bullying due to their religion. And among those, many students have reported various forms of bullying. As Aneeqa noted earlier, the stories that came into our office is students who are getting poisoned and having to be sent to the hospital. Students are facing physical violence. They're facing online harassment through social media, taunting, yelling, hurtful comments from peers. So the bullying, the nature of bullying looks different for different students, but they're experiencing it all. So I want you all to think about it, like, what are the mental health consequences of bullying? What impact do you think this has on both like the Muslim student that's experiencing it, but also the Muslim students that are watching it, and also the non-Muslim students that are either the bystanders of this, but also the ones who are perpetuating this as well. And to tell you about it in their own words, students describe mental health impacts of bullying as severe. They describe the emotional toll of bullying and how it results in feelings of depression, feelings of embarrassment, and for some, even suicidal thoughts. One female student notes that bullying can really affect how one sees themselves. Someone can be bullied a lot and go through depression, and depression can lead to suicide. And this is an 8th grade student who's making that comment as well. But it also leads to social isolation, especially for those that are visibly Muslim. And students can feel alone and like nobody cares about me. From one example, and going to my school as a niqabi is hard. No one wants to be in the same group with me. No one wants to have to sit with me. And no one wants to sit at the same table as me. So that impacts whether or not other students are working with them, or even just sitting with them to be able to sit at the same table during lunch or during classroom times as well. Among female students who wear the hijab, 35% of participants note experiencing physical harassment at schools, including incidents of having their hijabs pulled or removed. And almost a third of respondents, that's 31%, report hearing of someone who wears a hijab being physically harassed at school. Again, I call on you to think about what would these experiences do to a young Muslim's girl's relationship with the hijab. And of the cases that came into our office, there was one with 2 elementary school siblings who faced racial harassment, physical aggression, and attempts to forcefully remove one's hijab. And when she defended herself, the school labeled her as the bully. Again, the report wasn't just looking at peer-to-peer aggression, but it was also looking at Muslim students' relationship with their schools and with the staff. As Lena focused, it is not just other students that are perpetuating anti-Muslim bias, but that oftentimes it can also come from trusted adults in the school. 35% of students reported teachers or staff making offensive comment about Islam or Muslims inside or outside the school. And that 22% of students whose teachers taught lessons on Islam reported that their instructions was not conducted in a neutral, fair, or factual manner. Again, I ask on you to think about, like, how does this normalize Islamophobia in the classroom? And what does it mean when that normalization is coming from teachers? Like, what impact does that have on the things that other students see as okay? As an example, from both our report and also a case that came into our office, is that a social studies teacher informed her 4th grade class that Muslim terrorists were responsible for 9/11 attacks, despite the lesson materials lacking any reference to religion. Later, a classmate refused to work on a group project with the student, calling him a terrorist. Over half of the students, especially specifically 52%, reported bullying due to their ethnicity or their race. As Senator Eldridge early on noted that Muslims are oftentimes not only experiencing Islamophobia, but they are also experiencing the compounded impact of their intersecting identities. So not only is it because of their Muslim identity that they're getting bullied, but also because of their ethnicity and their race as well. And a portion of students expressed discomfort regarding their identity, with 10% indicating that they do not feel comfortable revealing that they are Muslims to others at their school. And 22% of students reported that they have actually, not only do they not feel comfortable expressing the fact that they're Muslim, but that they're altering and they're changing their appearance, their names, their behavior to hide the fact that they are Muslim. Our report also looked at students, Muslim students' experience since October 7th. Particularly, we were getting a lot of cases of students who were being unfairly punished, whether or not they were speaking about Palestine. 34% reported not being comfortable or only somewhat comfortable expressing their opinions of Palestine in school. But an important thing to note, this was an anecdotal response where students were sharing their experience. And one thing that came out of it was that whether or not their schools, whether or not they were comfortable, students were doing it regardless. And some of the reasons why they were doing that is that one student notes it is a genocide and it needs to be spoken about. So I'm going to do it whether or not I am facing unfair punishment or whether I feel uncomfortable in my school. And another student notes, personally, I don't care what people will say or do or what they will think. I feel comfortable expressing my opinion about Palestine, even though others have said rude things to me. I have freedom of speech as long as I do not harass someone, and there shouldn't be a problem. So this was, I think, an important note of like students feeling empowered, and how do we continue to make sure that Muslim students feel empowered and not victimized, and they will continue to know what their rights are and to stand true to justice. And now I will transition over to my colleague Aneeqa, who will go through the recommendations with us.
Thank you so much, Fatuma. So now, what can students do? Thank you so much, Lena, for starting us off on this discussion. We're going to be building upon some of the things that you talked about. So the first thing that we really want to emphasize is that students should document and report their bullying. So when we mean document, we mean recording incidents with as many details as possible, and to immediately report the incidents to your school administrators. If your school doesn't know that it doesn't know that it's happening, they cannot do anything to protect you. And to inform parents, guardians, or trusted adults to work with them to submit a formal complaint to your school, and to also report the incident to CAIR Massachusetts, so that we can keep a record of how much bullying is happening in schools, and to see if we can support you. As Lena talked about in her earlier, it's really important to try to seek support to establish an MSA, so that there is a safe space for students to just be Muslim and not have to worry about explaining your religion or representing a religion of 2 billion people to the entire community. So we encourage you to develop an action plan with a trusted adult or advisor. And if you need any help, to contact CAIR Massachusetts. And if you don't have enough students, Muslim students at your school to create an MSA, the next best thing is to try to join a Muslim youth group at your local mosque or Islamic center, so that you can have a safe space for support. We also encourage you to advocate for religious accommodations. You can use this report as a tool for advocacy. We encourage you to request accommodations for any of the religious practices you're engaged in. If you need prayer rooms for breaks, prayer breaks, dress code exemptions, and religious observance accommodations as well. And please reach out to CAIR Massachusetts if you encounter any difficulty in advocating for these accommodations. Lastly, students must know your rights and advocate for yourself. So in order to know your rights, we call you to read your school's handbook and their bullying policies, and also read CAIR Massachusetts anti-bullying advocacy recommendations. So that's the anti-bullying laws and advocacy section of this report. That's page 19. Our legal director, Barbara, will be talking about that section later today. And understand the bullying mechanisms of reporting bullying to your school, and report all incidents, again, of anti-bullying and Muslim bullying to both your school and CAIR Massachusetts. Next, we're going to talk about recommendations for parents. Before I get into the recommendations, I want to ground this section in the finding that only 35% of students share experiences of bullying with their parents. So I want parents to be aware that most students they will be more likely to share their experience with a friend or someone else than their parent. So you might think that your child is not experiencing something, or they're the exception, but chances are over a third of students, only a third of students share their experiences with their parents. So first, recognize signs of bullying. We incorporated a list in a more detailed list in the report, but some of the signs could include noticing if your child is avoiding or refusing to go to school, cuts, bruises, unexplained injuries, missing or damaged personal items, changes in physical or behavioral health. And it is really important to respond supportively. Again, many students don't share their experiences with bullying. So try to understand why that might be the case, and respond supportively and in an open-minded and calm way. So be available to as a source of support for the students, and work together on an action plan to inform the school administration. And just as we recommended for the students, it's important that you understand bullying laws and school policy, and you can do that using reviewing the school handbook and anti-bullying policies, and then CAIR Massachusetts anti-bullying and advocacy section as well. And lastly, advocate for culturally competent education. So advocate for your child's interests using this report, and working together with other parents, working together with parents of the other Muslim students at your school, meeting together with school administrations to with specific requests, just specific accommodation, and encourage teachers and school administration to practice cultural humility and be aware of anti-Muslim bullying. Mosques and community leaders also play an important role in supporting our youth. So we encourage mosques and community leaders to support MSAs and facilitate mentorship to support the youth. So what this can look like is facilitating collaboration between the local Muslim students and especially the ones who've established MSAs, and then with students who don't have access to those MSAs, and providing opportunities for them to get together. There can also be mentorship between college MSAs and high school Muslim students in a particular area. So there are many different ways to create spaces of safety for Muslim youth. And it is also really important to educate the community about their rights, familiarize themselves with the Massachusetts bullying laws, as we mentioned, for parents and students to both do, and CAIR Massachusetts anti-bullying advocacy recommendations, and also encourage the community to report incidents to their school and to CAIR-MA, since the imam, the community leader, is someone who is often come to for advice, and so it is important for the imams and community leaders to encourage community members to report these incidents. And also CAIR-MA is happy to give these presentations at your local mosque to educate the community about the issue of bullying and how they can equip themselves. And we've already been going to different communities like Worcester and Sharon, and plan to continue to do so. So you can feel free to reach out to us if you'd like us to do this presentation at your community. And I just wanted to say one last thing, if this is the only recommendation that you take away from this section, to use the findings of this report as an advocacy tool. See this report as an advocacy tool on its own. If you are experiencing something, or if you are requesting accommodations and you want something to bolster your request, you can use the findings of this report at your school. So just wanted to reiterate that this is a useful tool for Muslims all across Massachusetts in high school and middle school. Now I'm going to pass it to Barbara to discuss, our legal director, to discuss the anti-bullying laws and advocacy section of this report.
Thank you so much. This is where we pull in the boring lawyer to talk about these things. But I hope you won't find this boring, because it follows, trying to follow on what Aneeqa was just saying about the things that you can do, both as parents, community members, and students, to address the problem of bullying. In the report, the different legal tools start on page 19. I'm mainly going to talk about the anti-bullying plan and the option of calling the police. But it's just important to understand that there is a state law that requires every school to have an anti-bullying plan, but it doesn't say what the school must do in particular situations. So that's why, to just repeat what Aneeqa and others have said, you want to be familiar with that plan. When you look through the materials in our section on legal, the boring legal stuff, it moves from reporting to the school, then maybe the police, getting a court order, even filing lawsuits or a complaint with a federal agency. And now this sequence may look like it moves from the least helpful and effective methods to the most helpful and effective methods, right? Less serious to most serious. But I happen to think that just the opposite is true. I think the most effective way to address bullying is to report it to the school, what Aneeqa said, and then to remain both parents and students actively engaged in working out a solution. Yes, you might need to move on to those other remedies, but still this first step is, I think, the most important one of all. I mean, let's face it, of all the cases we see, rarely is there a lawsuit filed. I mean, we've not sued any schools, and we've seen, so many incidents. So I think, please don't underestimate the strength of you making a complaint to the school and following up. So for starters, again, we're going to just keep repeating it all evening. Read your school's anti-bullying plan. Know what it says in advance. I mean, you won't remember it all, but you don't want it the first time you're reading it to be when you're in the midst of a crisis. So be familiar with it at least in advance. You want to know who to report the problem to. I mean, in many schools, it's an assistant principal, but you just want to know who that person is. And if the need arises, then we recommend starting with an email, well, actually doing all your communications by email, so that you create a written record. And the reason for that is, if you're not getting the results that you need and you do need to escalate, you've got proof of the steps that you've taken and that you've put the school on notice. So you're going to know who to report it to, and then you're going to ask for an in-person meeting with the school. Before that meeting takes place, go through that anti-bullying policy at your school. It's going to be on the website, and look at what penalties are available for certain kinds of bullying behavior, because they're going to be different depending on if you're talking about social media, making fun of somebody, or an actual act of violence or something like that. So have a sense of what the remedies are for certain penalties, or penalties or consequences, discipline, whatever you want to call it, for certain behaviors, so that when you do go into that meeting, you are within the general ballpark of what can be expected for whatever issue you as the student or the parents are dealing with. Now, the school does get to make the decision about what it's going to do in terms of discipline, if any, for the student who's bullying, as well as protections, if any, for the victim and the victim's parents. But you, as the student parent, still have the right to talk about what you want to see done. And that's why you want to have a sense of what sort of remedies are possible through your school's policy. There's a list of some possible safety plan items that are on page 20. The safety plan, protects the student. It's not about disciplining necessarily the student who's bullying, it's about protecting the victim. And there's some good, useful options there. I know in our cases, we have used some of those. I don't think this is anything new in most of the schools. We've got a case going on right now where when we requested a safety plan, the school just pulled out the form that it uses for these things. So none of this, frankly, is terribly creative or novel. This just needs to be used in order for it to be effective. So there's the safety plan that's directed to the victim of the bullying, and then there's the discipline that's directed to the aggressor. Now, one of the things that you may find that can be very frustrating is the school will not tell you what the discipline is for the student who bullied your child, or if you're the student, if you're the victim. But that's because there are state and federal privacy laws that say the school cannot tell you. But I know that's an enormously frustrating aspect of this for both students and parents. A lot of times, you're probably going to figure this out anyway. Let's say if the student has to apologize, the student who was bullying has to apologize. If you're the person being apologized to, you're going to know that that was one of the forms of discipline. And also other kids tend to know if somebody is out of school for a week or so because they've been suspended. Sometimes you'll get wind of these things anyway. But I just want you to know that when schools don't share that, it's not because they're trying to make life harder for you. It's because they are not allowed to do so. The other thing I just wanted to bring to your attention, we have on page 21, and it's when schools take action in response to the bullying, but it can look sort of the opposite. It can look like the victim is actually the problem. An example might be if there's several students in a class who are bullying the only Muslim student, and that Muslim student transfers out. What message does that send? Either that they drove out that Muslim student, yay, they succeeded, or that there's some problem with that student that he or she had to leave the class. So, if the school suggests rearranging your child's schedule or seating arrangement, depending on the age, and your child and you are fine with that, that's absolutely fine. But the solution cannot simply be for the school's convenience. It needs to be something that serves the child's need for a safety, to ensure the child's safety. If the school simply won't deal with the issue, there's some other remedies on page 21. You're always welcome to call us for some of these more, legally sounding things. But we encourage you to be persistent with the school. We can't respond to every incident that happens. We can't go to every school district. A lot of this stuff you really are going to have to do on your own, but we have every confidence in your ability to do this. You just need to know the information which we're giving to you in this report, and then have the confidence to act on that. And hopefully this webinar will help you with that piece of it. The other section I just wanted to talk in more detail about is when bullying becomes a crime, and that starts on page 22. I mean, think about some of the incidents that are described in this report and where there was not action taken. Can you imagine if you assaulted somebody or beat them up out on the street, or in some other context? You'd get, people would call the police and you'd get arrested on the scene. But a lot of stuff goes on in the schools that is somehow seen as less serious simply because it happens in the school. And it's not. It's just as bad and perhaps even worse when you're in a place that's supposed to be safe. So that's why we have this information about behavior that may cross the line into a crime. And we also talk about reporting these things to the police. Now, we get it. Parents may or may not want to report something to the police, and their children certainly may or may not want the parents to report something to the police. But we simply will, we respect whatever decision parents and students makes, but we hope that it's an informed decision. So that's why we have that list of the most likely crimes that would happen in the course of some sort of bullying. There's a number of different crimes there that you can read through those. We're not trying to make you practice law. These are all really general descriptions, but we hope they give you a sense of possible criminal charges that you can consider. Keep in mind that you can also report something to the police, even if you don't necessarily want to make this something where the child is arrested or in juvenile court, you're seen as a delinquency. But you can still go to the police to tell them what's going on. And they sometimes may have useful advice for you. It's a good way, though, to document what's going on. And so if you do need to, say, go for one of those harassment prevention orders, which we described, it's going to help you enormously to have documentation showing that you thought this was serious enough that you went to the police about it. And it may be that police tell you this does not rise to the level of a crime, but still that police report, and you want to make sure you request a copy, shows that you thought it was serious enough so that if other action needs to be taken, you have proof that you were trying to get some satisfaction through the different legal systems. Finally, the last thing I'm going to talk about is on page 23, we do mention restorative justice as an alternative to the usual prosecution of a case through the criminal legal system. We feel very strongly that that's only appropriate for very minor incidents. I would never recommend anyone try that with something that was violent. And I don't think any reputable restorative justice program would even consider that. Also, both parties must agree to doing it. So it's nothing that you can get talked into or pressured into doing. But one of the things that I think is great about it is it brings in more people to the conversation than that just the person who was directly victimized. And during the part that Fatuma did, she talked about how many other students have seen or heard something taking place and the message that they take home from that they're the next victim, that they're not safe. So it brings in other people that are affected by this sort of disruption in a school. So I could bore you to tears with some of these other legal remedies. I think we'll stop here for the legal part and we can take questions and answers. But again, I think these first pieces of the section on remedies may seem like the least serious ones, but I truly believe they are the ones that will probably get you the farthest in the great majority of bullying instances that a student or a student's family will encounter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Barb. We are now going to transition into our Q&A portion of the night. So if you have any questions, please write it down in the Q&A portal in the Zoom webinar, and we'll take some questions and then we'll close up, inshallah. So we have one question, and I welcome anyone to come and chime in, which is, do you have an estimate of how many incidents go unreported? Maybe I'll pass it to Barb in our legal department for this one.
I mean, that's always the trick, isn't it? What is happening that we don't know about? Very few of these cases make it to the legal department. I mean, you saw the numbers that Fatuma talked about in her report and how that, translates to a lot of students, but they rarely make it to me, which is okay. I mean, if people are dealing with these issues at the level of their individual schools and getting results, then that's okay. That's good. I think based on the survey results, our assessment is that these are problems that are going on that aren't being properly addressed. So I think it's like, we also do a lot of work with victims of hate crimes. Most people estimate that there's, far, far more incidents happening than to the point where there's ever even someone picks up the phone and calls a third party, let alone a lawyer.
We received a
Thank
few
you,
more
Barb.
questions.
Yes. I will read the questions, and anyone feel free to chime in and add onto it as well. So we have a question from Carol. Thank you. We have a similar report in California. Yes, this is actually kudos to CAIR California, who started, I think they're like a decade and more into creating these reports. And we gained a lot of insight from CAIR California to be able to implement this into Massachusetts. So Carol had, what kind of research do you recommend based on your findings? I know for me, one thing that kept coming up is the question of like the spiritual impact on bullying on people's like faith. I think especially at that age, like we had cases, although this report was focusing on middle school and high school students, we get cases starting in elementary school. And at a time where people's like faith and spiritual development. I think middle school and high school ages, a lot is happening already. And then when you add the compounded fact of like this is not just any type of bullying, but bullying due to your faith, what long-term impact does that have on people's spiritual well-being? So that's a question, a research question that I would be interested in seeing the findings for, looking back at it at an older age. Or anyone else have any research questions or things that you want to think about? If
I just
not,
think
I can, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think it'd be helpful to do research around higher education as well, which there are other organizations who are doing that. So conducting another study around that, I think would be a suggestion of mine. But otherwise, yeah, we can move forward to the next questions.
Right. Thank you, Mariam. And the next question that we have is, do you have an indication if incident cases went up post Israel's attack on Gaza?
That's for Barbara.
Oh, hi, Fuzzy. How are you? I don't know about, I mean, if the question is about what happened in the schools, again, the survey did, yeah, the survey captured some of that. So I would defer to Aneeqa and Fatuma for what they heard about bullying in the schools. I will tell you that in terms of hate crimes in Massachusetts, we definitely saw a spike after that, but that's affecting adults and older children too. But I think that's a slightly different question if we're talking about hate crimes, because of it includes adult victims than what students may have seen in the school. So I'm going to lob it back to Aneeqa and Fatuma for that.
Aneeqa, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so we had a section on the experiences of students regarding their being silenced for their pro-Palestinian advocacy. They tried to, hold fundraisers, they tried to share their opinions, and kind of um the suppression from their teachers, their administrators, their being called, their experiences from peers. So we talked a little bit about that in our webinar, but we also have a more fleshed out section detailing some of the cases that came to us, and some of the quotes and experiences of the students from the survey. But as so we kind of just captured that from surveying the students. But I think that honestly, I think that the statistic that's shared from our civil rights team, that like there was a huge spike in general cases that happened in post October 7th. Like while we didn't capture that exact data in the survey, like pre October 7 and post October 7, I'm sure that it was reflected on a school level as well. And Barb, what was the statistic that we had? Like, what was the percentage of increase in calls that we experienced post October 7th?
Well, don't put me on the spot for the total number, but we have over the past in 2024, we saw a 65% increase in calls about hate crimes, but that's the entire year. However, the bulk of those came in the fourth quarter, which would be October, November, and December. Yeah.
May I ask a question, or am I going out of order?
Go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the implications of race on the students as they experience Islamophobia?
I think like one note that they made was that I think while 48% of students like had noted that they experienced bullying because of their faith, 52% of students noted that they were experiencing based off their race and ethnicity. And I think also like given the fact that oftentimes like Muslims are racialized, I think that intersecting like dynamic gets complicated as well. But I think, and then when you put in the fact that like if like for example what someone is experiencing, if I look at like my brother for example, who is a Black Muslim boy, and he would be experiencing like bullying because of his Blackness. But also his name is Abdinur as well. So it could also be for his religious identity as well. I think that is kind of going back to the question of what more research could be done. It's like if we also like took this survey and took this data and we looked at it just like through the lens of like racial identity, and what the different percentages are for different ethnic communities. That is something that I would be interested in like looking at even deeper, because I think that can tell us even a larger story as well. And I just put my brother's name out there. He's gonna come from Any other thoughts on that? I don't know if you were gonna say something different, Mariam, or you were.
No, I was just gonna go to the next question if you wanted me to.
I can move us to the next question. Thank you for the informative webinar. You spoke about some proactive activities Muslims can do. Can you suggest some activities other than Islamophobia training that schools can do?
I think that one of the things that we talked about was we were encouraging the students and the parents to advocate for religious accommodations. It would be great if schools can be, proactive in offering those accommodations for the Muslim students, and having communication with the students to kind of understand how they can support them during Ramadan, generally throughout the year, um, and providing support to having to like an MSA. I think these are some of the things that we included in the bullying report for students and parents to advocate for. I think these are needs that students often bring up in high schools all across Massachusetts.
Which is gives us the opportunity to point out that hopefully by the end of the week, we'll be posting some new materials on our website and on social media about for parents and students in the public schools, information to give to your school that helps them understand what Ramadan looks like. If you're a Muslim student, and information for parents about how to go about requesting accommodations during Ramadan.
Is it okay if I chime in for so I think in addition to Islamophobia trainings, I think a huge thing that a lot of schools and institutions miss is having important incident reporting forms or resources that are accessible and that students are aware of. That's a problem that I noticed that in my school, there, and I'm pretty sure most schools, like, there is an incident reporting form, but it's either kids don't know about it, it's not accessible, and it's honestly just geared towards, I guess, only a very few types of incidents. So I think having and working towards upping those type of resources and having students aware of the resources that are available to them, and even if actions aren't taken later or consequences towards these incidents aren't applied, having them on record and having these statistics are important, as they can push for advocacy work like this and have greater impact in the future. So I think working towards having these incident reporting forms and resources is, I think, something that is honestly underestimated, and I think could have a really big impact in the future.
That's an important point, Lena. Thank you so much for sharing that. I just lost the Q&A section. Pulling it back up. One of the questions is, were there any questions that indicated visible Muslimness affected students? So no, the questions we're looking at generally students that identified as Muslims, but was not looking at whether or not they were visibly Muslim or not, but them sharing their experience. The survey was anonymous, so students self-identified in the survey.
Can I just add, Fatuma, we did ask questions, like a question about hijab, and we shared the finding about that. If a student, we asked if a student experienced any harassment for wearing a hijab, and that was one of our key findings, was that 35% of Muslims who wore hijab in Massachusetts schools experienced some sort of harassment. We also asked questions about students hiding their identity. So that was also a very important finding, that many students were hiding their identity in whatever way that is, if that's their name, if that's their appearance, or anything else. So yeah, those are very important findings that, you know, that provided a lot of insight into what students are experiencing and how they see themselves and their Muslim identity.
Okay. Great, thank you so much. I think now, if there are no more questions, would be a good time for us to transition into closing. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We are so grateful to have you all with us and to be in this conversation with us. As Aneeqa noted, we hope this report becomes an advocacy tool for you and the Muslim youth in your community. While the report consists of stories and statistics that will anger you, I know it angered me. I hope that that anger is fueled into action so that we can all collectively work together to make sure that Muslim youth are protected and that their faith, their sense of self, their physical, social, spiritual, and emotional well-being is protected. If you are interested in learning more about the report and continuing this conversation, the discussion with us, I hope that this is not the start and the end, but that it is a continued effort to be in conversation with community members. Please reach out. My contact information is there, and we would love to help you all think through and also help us think through what the next steps for this report is for our community. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you so much to our guest, Senator Jamie Eldridge, Alina. Thank you all so much for joining us and for offering both your time, but also sharing the work that you all are doing in your community with us. And thank you to the entire CAIR-MA staff for being here with us as well. And I hope you all have a great night, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.